Let's go over some extreme productivity for copywriters and marketers, anybody who works with documents and wants to get more done in less time with fewer resources. I'm Justin Hitt from Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. What you see on your screen right now is Obsidian. There are 22,000 notes in here. These notes are a compilation of past articles, client assignments, research projects, just about everything I've written in the last 22 to 23 years. There are materials that go back as far as 1996 in this system. As you can see, I have projects, the organization, we won't talk about that today, but I have specific folders that talk about the different content areas as I manage several newsletters. Now, Obsidian is just one note-taking platform. It doesn't really matter what note-taking platform you have. The power of what I'm going to show you here today allows you to work in teams. It allows you to work very productive yourself and to manage bulk records. So you've taken, you've written 100 headlines. You've written 100 bullet points. You've written the same product several times or to the same audience several times. How do you library these materials and then use them in a consistent way so that you can write copy faster? So for example, if I want to find out what have I written in the past about effective copywriting, then I can just search and it will go out there and find it. Now, no match was found. So it's probably effective writing. You're going to know your materials better than others, but I've written articles in 2022 about writing consistently. I've written essays with writing tips, how to write web copy fast. There's also artificial intelligence tools in here that I can go over some other time. The key is that everything in this repository is written in Markdown. Markdown is a simple language format. It's even more simple than HTML, and it creates text files, which are then stored in a repository. So let me give you an example. This is actually a template. This right here is an article written in Markdown. The pound here is the headline, and then you have the article details below. Now, being written in text, it allows me to use multiple tools to edit this. I'm calling it code because writing, again, is the code of persuasion. And so I've got an article in here with cross-references. Now, Obsidian allows me to have cross-references. If you want to know more about using Obsidian itself, I can go into that in a different tutorial. But right now, I want to talk about extreme productivity when it comes to writing, especially when you're writing large assignments. So I also use a tool called Scrivener, but here is my repository of all records. What I've clicked on over here is Visual Studio. Visual Studio is a software development environment, and it helps make the editing better. So I have 22,000 files here, and I want to make a correction in the code, which is my writing is code. So I'm not going to explain the details of regular expression, but I can use regular expression to search files. There are 685 instances of this particular tag. Now, this tag is an end reference, and when I convert it from Microsoft Word to Markdown, which is a very easy thing to do, it's no different than people converting to use SharePoint or use some other productivity tool. The key here is that if everything is in text, I can edit it quickly. I can edit it with multiple sets of tools, and then I can also, which we'll see in a second, store it in a repository. So in this case, I have a little end marker, and this is just cosmetic. Your work may be different. This file was created in 2018. You can see there's some formatting challenges. Those kinds of things don't matter as much as you might think, because of the way Markdown works, it doesn't really care about those spaces. You can see some front matter, which is a kind of a metadata. So it's no different than going into Word and filling out the properties for a document. But altogether, these are in a repository where I can see all of the materials. Now, I have a standard format. So if we go over here to Obsidian in my processes, I have kind of a format or a model for how I do Markdown. Now, this may look more technical than it needs to be, but again, I'm teaching this concept to my staff. I'm teaching this to my clients so that they can understand how to be more productive as a writer. But already I've been able to find something, and even though it's cosmetic, I've been able to find something that needs to be changed in this platform. I'm able to quickly pull up references of it and see this is how easy it is to update the text. I wanted this postcard reference because this is a list of little postcard excerpts. I wanted this postcard reference to be a header 2, so I just put 2 pound signs in front of it. But again, all these changes are happening on a text file that is on a directory structure that's really basic, that is being fed to a GitHub repository, a private GitHub repository. So what I'm doing here is I'm able to find all these references of this string in all these files, quickly verify that it's what I intend it to be, and then I click search and replace. Now I'm going to change 685 references in a matter of seconds that would otherwise taken a lot of handwork, meaning I'd have to go through the files, I'd modify them at the time, I wouldn't have the consistency, I wouldn't have the records cleaned up, I wouldn't have, and this is the next part that's very important, I wouldn't have a record, a trail of my changes because I would have used some kind of into the document change log that doesn't always get filled out. But what I've just done is I've made 140 changes to this file. Now, there were 685 instances of the hash end marker, and I have replaced all of those in a matter of seconds. And here's what's most valuable. There's actually a Git repository, and I use GitHub, of all of my files up here, as well as instructions on how to use it and what products are we using, including on platforms. So I can actually edit this same repository on my iPad, on my laptop that I take out. I have a disposable laptop that when I travel, I take this laptop. It has just copies of materials on it. And then if the laptop's ever lost or stolen, I can remotely erase the laptop. But every change I made was, again, put out on the repository. So again, if you want more details about how GitHub works, maybe you have a team of writers, we can talk about your specific situation. But what we've done here is I've made all these changes. Okay, I've got changes on my local machine queuing, so I can actually do this offline. I'm going to note what I just did. So remember, in the past, you would go through, and then at the end of each file, you would have a change log, and you can see the remnants of change logs here. And I would put a note in the change log saying, corrected cosmetic triple hash end of file. Okay, so that's what I did. And I would put this in each little thing, and I'd have to make it a complete sentence so the next person could understand it or all that other stuff. But I'd do that for 140 files, 684 changes. I don't have to do that anymore. I can simply hit commit. And remember the change comment was corrected cosmetic triple hash. Now that's going to take a little bit longer here because what it's doing is it's actually looking at the original file, what was changed, it's recording a change there. It's all using a Git source code tool. So that's very important to understand here. We're not just putting words on pages. We're not worried about cosmetics. We're worried about getting key ideas and concepts down. Now, you can do this with images. You can do this with all your text. But the bottom line is that we're getting words on page. We're putting them someplace where they can be easily recalled. And then we're ultimately storing all of that someplace off-site so it's not lost. I don't know how many times you've had the concern or frustration where you weren't able to retrieve a file. But now I get full historical texts of my documents. So this is some quotes. These are opportunity quotes on GitHub, and they have a whole document history. So I'm going to go ahead and sync the changes from my local machine using Visual Studio. Now there's other tools you can do this. You can do it from the command line, but I want to show you simple tools to increase your productivity as a writer. I'm going to sync changes. It's sending these changes across the internet. They're all encrypted. They're being stored in a private repository. But what this gives me is a history. If something goes wrong in one of these files, I can go in and see what modifications were made. I was correcting a Malcolm X reference, and these are the actual changes. Now, some of these things are a little bit more detailed than you might need, but if I want to look in that batch of changes, I can come in here and click the reference. So what I did here is I actually made a contextual reference to Malcolm X, which means there is because of contextual reference, there is likely a character card in here. So let me do this a little bit differently so we can preserve some privacy. Malcolm, and of course I spelled Malcolm wrong here. Yeah, I got it. So in the case, and I can clean this up at another time, but in the case of misspellings, imagine being able to correct a misspelling across all of your documents at one time. So here's a little stub here. This is a Rolodex stub. Since Malcolm X is a historical figure, I've actually created a stub for him and cross references. And then as I'm developing, now if this was a fictional character, as I'm developing the character, I can update the what, when, why, where. But as a historical character, any of my research around this individual, so if I'm writing a biography, if I'm using him as a reference inside of a document, if I'm trying to make a point in an article and Malcolm X is the particular character that we're talking about here, then I would basically update this file and it gives me a point of reference. Now let me show you something that's interesting, because your markdown can be viewed as HTML or as Word document or as a PDF. It doesn't matter. But look, there's his image. There's some bullet points about the person himself. And then ultimately, I've got a reference point that's being developed over time. Now that boosts your creativity, because you're not having to research the same person multiple times. So if this was George Washington, it's the same concept. Now, again, I have a product about using quotes in influential materials. So I have a whole library of quotes in here. And let me just use search a little bit more effectively. Here's George Washington. Same template, same outline. Here's a notable quote for George Washington. Now, if I need a quote from George Washington, I can look him up in this and find his quotes quickly and easily and bring them forward. Now, what's important about this is that, again, every change we make is tracked in our system. Now, do you need every change? Probably not. But because it's automatic, it's part of our source management. It's part of what we do to create an offsite backup of our writing. It is automated. It is easy. Now, remember I said I corrected a cosmetic triple hash at the end of the file? Well, look at that. If I want to know everything that changed with that particular revision, same thing. I get it all again. Now imagine you've written something for a client, you've put it up in front of them for approval, they approve it, and then next week you write something else and they say, well, I like what you had before. You don't have to keep track of all that stuff. You just go back in the revisions and you can see, okay, well, what did we have last week? And then how is it different? And then now you can either merge those together or you can go ahead and write up the new materials. Now, because I'm writing everything in Obsidian, I'm able to quickly get information together. I don't have to worry about saving it. I don't have to worry about if I'm in the right app. I don't have to worry about anything because it's all stored as text files. That is what gives us the massive boost in productivity, because we're not worried about all the little details. So what's something about George Washington that's important? Well, actually when, so first president of the United States, we already got that. General in Revolutionary War. I now have this note in place. When was this? During the U.S. Probably the Revolutionary War. I don't know. We can basically make quick notes, clean them up later, and build our materials together. Now, this is vital for being able to write a bunch of headlines and then to extract from those headlines. And I'll give you an example of that with these reference files. These are what's called maps of content. So as I'm building out a report on lead generation, for example, I have a headline in here to make it interesting, to kind of give me the theme of what's going on, how to attract more leads, qualify, and predispose to purchase from you over anybody else. This is a map of content. So it's a document type is index. And then here I basically just have notes, big chunks of notes. Now, as these notes expand, so you see, you can boost your lead generation by increasing credibility, both credibility of your offer and yourself. I didn't reference a link. Now I'm going to open this in a new tab so you can see it. And then this is actually an article. So I can write these articles in draft every day if I want. I can connect them together. I can correct spelling. You never saw me once go up here to the menu bar and click save. It's all automatic. It's all in the system itself. Now, at the end of a working session, I go over here and I see what files have changed, and I'm not really sure why I changed the George Washington file. So I can open that up and I can see exactly what was changed. So let's say you're going through a work session, you're creating these files in the Markdown, and then at the end of that session, the customer asks some questions, you can review the changes. Maybe you gave the files to somebody else to review. Now, you can give those files to somebody else depending on how you have your GitHub set up by giving them access to the files, or you can check out the files and give them a clone of a section of your repository. There's a lot of ways to do that. We can talk about what's specific and best for you. But can you see how easy this can be? Now, again, I'm showing you with different tools, so it could look like it's a lot of work, but ultimately how easy it is because you have complete control over the present and the past of your documents, as well as the future of your documents through adding additional materials. So these were just minor updates to text across documents. Now, one of the things about having to put these comments in is that it kind of forces you to work, and this is the last part of the productivity, it forces you to work in sprints. So one of the things that's very useful about using GitHub, and that's why I use GitHub, is because I can actually open issues. Like I can be working on the work at hand. Let's say I'm doing a report, and I'll go back to Obsidian to show you. I'm doing a report on risk management. My next book is going to be an entry-level guide to risk management. I can create my key information. So here's a big mistake about risk management. A lot of people don't know about, and I even wrote an article, and we're going to open that in a new tab again. I even wrote an article, or actually had previously published some materials on that, and I've linked the things together. Now, the linking them together gives me context across documents, and Obsidian itself gives me a tool to see that context. Now, we'll talk about that in a second. But again, I'm just bullet points, building things up, audience, keywords, all that in the same repository, tracked with change controls. So if I ever make a mistake, I can back out of my mistakes, but I'm working in sessions. So I can work just on the topic of risk management. I can outline my book. I can do research. I can do all of that, tag it all together, and then ultimately store it in the repository. And then I know that all of my work is captured. All of my work matters. Now, again, in a more advanced session, we can talk about why every document has a serial number, and why every document has what's called front matter, what some of the front matter means, such as the status and workflow. And we can go into a little bit more detail about these dashboards. And I'm just going to give you a glance at these. Don't get too excited. They aren't necessarily required because, again, how you track your work depends on how you set up your projects. But if I want to see all of my articles in process, so I own several newsletters, several blogs, and I want to know the state of my documents in process right now, I can actually pull up the editorial status Kanban. Now I'm going to go ahead and make this full screen so you can get the full view of this, but this is actually a workflow Kanban that shows me where my documents sit in the writing area. Now, if you're like me and a lot of other writers, you're often writing little things here and there and little things everywhere, and then you're working through those as they're necessary because the number of ideas outstrips the number of places to publish. And also, your editorial materials you might work out 12 months of a newsletter in advance. So I know that in my recycle bin, and this isn't a recycle bin like trash, this is part of I talk about this in the editorial workflow programs that I've done earlier, but this means this document is ready to recycle. This is a document from 2022 about facts about profitable customers, and it's product AL3, and it's ready to be recycled. It's ready to be digested into social media. It's ready to be converted into lead generation. If I click over here, you can see it. You can even see that some of that recycling started because I have a WooCommerce product set up on the website offering this particular product. And so here's some social media. Now, again, because all of my writing is in one place, I'm going to show you how productive you'll get. In fact, you'll get so productive that you'll be writing more than you can use. So you have to be careful about that. But what's happening here is I'm able to take a social media post. Do you want more profitable customers in business? Use this checklist to help you find more profitable customers. I can now use that text, but link to the product itself, which I've done here. Next, I could link to a lead generation piece to get somebody on an opt-in, then introduce them to the product. I could turn this into a new article. I could turn this into a fascination or bullet point that's used in a promotion. I could turn an article into an email. I could keep going on and on and on. And now I'm able to get more written in less time. Here's some old materials. This is from 2009. It's notes from 2009. I can recycle all of this into what I'm producing at hand. So in summary, because I'm storing everything in text file format using a document structure called Markdown, I'm able to work with any tool I need. I can use a visual editor. I can use Microsoft. I don't like to use Microsoft Office and stuff because all the bells and whistles distract from the writing process. To get my draft done, I use whatever text tool I can. There's a lot of Markdown tools that are what you see is what you get. Some are source-based. Some are, they're just a lot of choices. You can write with whatever tool you want. You can even write in Scrivener and export from Scrivener into a folder to reference those materials. But again, if you're writing in Scrivener as a writing environment, then you stay in Scrivener. This Markdown is before you get to Scrivener. In fact, my latest book, speaking of using a repository and speaking of using a platform for storing your materials, my last book, Instant Credibility, right here, is in a private repository online, including all the images, including all of the text materials, including drafts of the book, the manuscript itself. Everything is in here and easy to go. So you can manage large projects. In fact, when I was doing systems administration work, we managed projects that had 1 million lines of code. So I forgot how many hundreds of thousands of words that are in my repository, but it is 22,000 files. And it's very easy to get in and out of the files. Now, with the repository setup, I can allow someone else to come in here and have permission to go change the images. So here's some graphics that were in the book itself. I can go see them in review. I can see what the last version was. I can look at the code that's associated with that particular graphic. Now, again, you don't have to use code, but if you have an image that's created in Photoshop, you can export it in vector format or some video tool or audio tool or whatever you're using, export it in a text format and then store it in here. There are drawbacks. GitHub will only store text files. While it will store digital files, you won't be able to see the differences between versions. But as far as source, as your writing being the source code of your productivity, the source code of influence, this makes it easy. Plus, all these tools are free. Now, I pay for these tools because I find them very productive and very useful, but ultimately, these tools are free. So the last 2 points are that because all your code's in one place and it's very lightweight, text tends to be very lightweight. No more downloading huge PowerPoint presentations, huge Word documents, huge lists. You can actually put them in a text format. They'll be easier to manage, but that means that I can work from my iPad. I can do serious writing from my iPad. In fact, I took pictures on my phone. I did a video presentation. It was 14 minutes and 26 seconds. I wrote its show notes. I did all of that from my laptop and stored it on the text file, synced it over to the desktop, and now you're viewing it on the screen. Now, I do use some placeholder references, and I don't have to have a finished document to get progress. So I might come back in here later and add a headline. I might come in here and work with the YouTube Studio in order to clean the text up, but I always keep a master copy in this vault in this repository so that I can manage it. Now, I know I've covered a lot in today's session in this podcast, and the key is when you're writing, being able to focus on writing and not to worry about mistakes, not to worry about format, not to worry about whether your stuff's backed up or not, so that you have one or two steps, and I've showed you the one or two steps here that are in addition to your writing that are not distracting from your writing. So essentially, you can just sit down on the computer, create a new document, and just start writing. So you just write. Okay. And now you're able to get the words down more quickly. The productivity boost comes when you're able to do what's called structured writing by being able to cross-reference documents, by being able to search all your documents very easily, to be able to focus on the business of writing rather than a lot of the other transactional elements like track changes in Word documents or sending emails back and forth to each other. You can simply focus on the writing elements, and then you're publishing from your writing to some kind of text file, for example. And I'll just give you a real quick on that before we go. If you are, right here. If you want to go from an article draft to a proof, you just simply go to export to PDF. You click export to PDF, save the file, and then boom, it opens up as a PDF. Now you send that to the client, they give you feedback on it, and you put the feedback back into the original source right here, and you can then just be done. That's it. You create them another proof if you want. It's like all the mechanical stuff has been taken care of. All of the, where do I store things has been taken care of. I literally have 23 years of writing in one place. Now it's almost 2 gigs of text files, but again, I can search it all relatively quickly. I can find every reference to a particular marketer. And then the last thing I'm going to leave you with is I can actually visualize all the text. And I'll just let you see that in amazement. While I'm writing, I'm writing. While I'm editing, I'm editing. While I'm working, I'm saving backups of everything. While I'm collaborating with people, I don't have to worry about changes stomping on each other because I have a full source code tracking system in place. All of these tools can be secure in your local environment, and I can help you do that. They can be like I'm using GitHub here because I want maximum flexibility. But again, I can now visualize, and in another session, I can show you some artificial intelligence tools that help you organize your work faster, to find related work so you don't write the same thing more than once. And then also to start building a library of your research so that when you're writing white papers, long-form sales letters, when you're writing lead generation pieces, you can almost have your swap file at your fingertips and borrow, clip, rewrite, bring it all up on your screen at one time and just get the writing done. I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips, and this has been about how to just supercharge your productivity. I actually have a full course and training materials on becoming a more productive copywriter, and it's the mechanics of getting the writing down, and it's simplified to such a point that you can just open a text document somewhere and just start writing. It still works with all these other tools and the writing tools and stuff, but it works so well that you are just miles ahead of the game. We can talk more about the visualization. We can talk about anything you have questions about. And you send those questions to www.adbriefings.co.uk. Just go to the contact page and send your questions in, or you can join our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode. I hope this has been useful. And it's the amazing science of modern tools and being able to just be tremendously more productive. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next podcast.